This is Marvin L. Storm. We're here with Bob Grewal. Bob, I would like to have you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your business and where you're located.
Sure. I'm Bob Grewal. I'm the president and owner of Seapoint Business Advisors. We are a M&A firm, business intermediary, business brokerage firm based in Southern California. There's a group of 6 intermediaries here. We sell businesses that are often ignored by most investment banks and might be beyond some of the capabilities of the traditional business broker. So we focus on businesses with transaction values between $1 and $50 million. And we sell manufacturing, distribution, wholesale, business services companies, are just some of the types of companies. But we consider ourselves generalists. And we have quite a range of experience in different fields.
So I'd like to have you to share a little bit about your kind of pre-M&A career, what you did, and kind of the path that led you to being an M&A advisor. Certainly you didn't go to school, college, with a major in M&A and a minor in accounting or whatever. What was the career path that led you to what you're doing now?
So I actually did study finance and electrical engineering in college and graduated with a finance degree. And I had intended on kind of taking maybe this investment banking route, and I ended up getting into technology, which is another love of mine. And I started working for a company called Global Crossing Global Center, and I was working in their data hosting division. And my clients at the time, and this is the late 90s, were Google and Yahoo when they were tiny, especially Google. I actually was fortunate enough to even have lunch there when there was 30 employees there. And grew my career in technology and software. And then after a while, I realized my ultimate passion would be to have my own company. So I started a computer accessories company making laptop bags and anything related to computer laptops. And I had a factory in overseas that I work with, and ultimately grew the business. And then,
so was this a startup that you launched it and started it up on your own?
Yes, yeah. I started from scratch. I mean, my experience at the time was primarily working with companies directly, working with entrepreneurs and companies. This is my first experience selling a B2C product, so a business to consumer product, and so it was definitely different. I enjoyed the challenge, and I grew through the company to a certain level. And then at some point, I had determined that I either need to get a partner to help me with the production in China and overseas, or I need to sell it. So while I was doing that, going through that process, I found a partner that was amazing. And then I found somebody that wanted to buy my company. And then
just out of curiosity, for those out there that we have a lot of entrepreneurs of all different levels and stages of their entrepreneurial journey. How did you go about finding a business partner? Was this someone that you knew? Were you introduced to them? How did that kind of unfold?
That's a good question. So I started thinking to myself, I'm really good at the product design and the sales and the marketing. And who could I find that's really good at production? And so what I did is I looked at the industry itself and tried to find companies that were out there. And I just simply picked up the phone and cold called them all. And I said, I would love to talk with you. I own a company.
Talk to them about their business or about partnering with them, or actually
partnering with them. Partnering with them. I would call and I would say, hey, listen, I would love to partner with you in some way. I'm very comfortable with the design and knowing what consumers want. I just need help with the production side of things. It's just an area that I'm not an expert in, but also, there's definitely a language barrier and a cultural barrier and quite frankly, a geographical barrier. So,
so you're talking about geographically in Asia where you were outsourcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was hard to survive in that industry unless you had sourced your product in Asia, because that's where the entire ecosystem is. And so I found somebody that actually owned a factory in Asia, but was trying to sell computer accessories all over the world. And I was quite frankly, probably a little bit stronger than he was in the sales and marketing, and he was way stronger than me on the operational side. And so I cold called him. He said, "Sure, let's talk." And so I drove out to his office, met with him, and
So
made a
was this in
partnership.
Southern California where you're currently
Yeah,
located, or
yeah. It
someplace
was in
else?
Southern. It just coincidentally enough, he actually was in Southern California, so it didn't make too much. It wasn't too difficult to go reach him, and so I was able to just drive over to see him. And then he proposed his 50-50 relationship, and I was kind of mulling it over. And at the time, I had somebody that had sold like medical cases, and they thought my business was interesting. And so he made an offer to buy the whole business. I actually met him at a hotel in Beverly Hills when he flew out, and he just made an offer. And I just said, "Okay, sure, I'll sell it." And I enjoyed the process of selling my business more than I enjoyed running it. And I just said, "This is really fun." And I said, I want to see if I can do this for other people. And I realized there was this whole world that existed that I didn't know about. So, you had people that would sell, restaurants and retail, and I didn't really want them selling my business. And then you had, because I just quite frankly felt I could do it better. And then there was investment bankers from Goldman Sachs. That business is way too small for them. They're not going to bother with that. I'm like, this is an amazing opportunity. You've got all these baby boomers and all these businesses. This is going to be great for the next 20, 30 years. And so that's how I got into the business by selling my own business first. So I sat in the seller's shoes. And so that's what makes me understand sellers a lot better than most folks in my industry.
Mhm. As you take a look at your journey from how you initially got started in the business until today, what do you think are some, personal characteristics and individual strengths that have contributed to your success as an advisor in this business?
So I would say it's a sensitivity to the emotions that a lot of sellers go through when they're selling their business. Quite frankly, the technical side of what we do, which is recasting financial statements, understanding balance sheets and P&Ls and cash flow statements and talking about working capital, all that's quite easy. It's like easy to do. Most of what we do, and when I'm sitting with other professionals, the attorneys and the accountants, we all agree that our job is to a great extent is to be a therapist for our clients, is to recognize what's bothering them, what's really the issue here that we're talking about. And oftentimes a lot of folks feel, and I've had one client just last year tell me, "Bob, you're kind of like a psychologist." And I understand them. And so the emotional side of things and being sensitive to also what I anticipate will be a problem for a business owner. So I know if a business owner asks me for something, I'm saying, "Well, let me tell you why you probably won't be happy with that outcome." And so that's been really helpful, is to be empathetic and sensitive to business owners.
I think that's insightful because so much of just like buying any product, it's an emotional, process. You justify the decision that you've made, but with the numbers and the reasoning behind it. But at the core of almost any type of purchase or process or transaction, it's all about feelings and emotions and fears and the desires, dreams of people. And if you can dial into that, sounds like you've done a good job of that. So as an M&A advisor, as you look at all these transactions that you've been a part of, kind of what would you, not by transaction specifically, but kind of your greatest accomplishment, not greatest transaction, but a greatest accomplishment as an advisor?
I would say the one that sticks out to me the most, I guess, it's doing deals in the midst of the pandemic. We had this very large e-commerce transaction, and they were based in the United Kingdom. And we were trying to convince them to sign with us without actually physically meeting with both the owners. One of the owners was actually a woman of Swedish descent, but living in Hong Kong. And we only talked to her through Zoom. And then we we actually even talked to the buyer strictly through Zoom and never met the primary buyer. And that transaction was wonderful. The folks were great to work with. It was very complicated. It was the largest deal we've ever done. It was a 9-figure transaction, and we got lucky. I'm grateful for that. I don't allow my ego to get so big to think it was all skill, but I also feel there was just an enormous number of personalities. There was a complicated accounting firm. There was quality of earnings reports. There were just a lot to do with it. And I'm just really proud of how my team did on that. It's not just me, it was my entire team. We just did such a great job on it. And
so just out of curiosity,
we're friends with most of our sellers. All of them.
Out of curiosity, on a transaction of this size, you're talking 9 figures, and that's a sizable transaction. And that's a little bit outside of the scope that you normally deal with. How were you introduced to these people? Did they reach out to you? Was it a person that you knew through a relationship, or how did that transaction unfold?
So we got introduced to them from a business consultant they were working with. So they were working with a business consultant that was trying to help them grow their business and navigate doing business in the United States. So they had established a distribution center here in Southern California. And so there was a consultant here they were working with, and he had explained that I'm ultimately looking to try to sell my company. Do you know anyone? And so we got introduced that way. And they were smaller. They were much smaller. You're right. It's outside of our typical size and focus, but they grew into the valuation. And then we just built such a great relationship with them early on. And we love to meet owners years in advance. So if they're not looking to sell right now, that's okay. And if you're looking to sell in 3 years, what are things that I can do now to maximize the value? And so we'll talk with them, and they want to get a sense of what their business is worth, and we tell them what they need to do. And we get something out of it in the sense we like to build relationships, and our hope is to build enough goodwill so we're the folks they choose when they decide to go to market. And that's how we did it with that one. And quite frankly, the owners they were so coachable is the best way I would describe it. They're very coachable. We would coach them, and they would listen, and they would take our advice. And sometimes owners don't want to, and they have their own way of doing things, and it's their business. They can do whatever they want. These folks would just listen to us, and boy, they just got a great outcome, and it was wonderful. And I see myself being friends with them probably forever. It's just, we're so close now.
That's very cool. Yeah. So in your M&A, practice, do you offer other types of services such as consulting or valuation or anything like that?
We provide an opinion on value. So sometimes, clients want to just plan and want to get a sense of what their business is worth. So we'll provide them with an opinion on what we think the business is worth from a market approach. We do a little bit of consulting, not much. And we also will sell commercial property. So sometimes an owner, if they own the warehouse that their business is in, and they're saying, look, I'm leaving the state of California. I want to get out of here. I don't want to be a landlord. We'll sell that property too.
As you look back on all the transactions you've been involved in, sometimes things don't go all that smoothly. What are some of the, kind of the larger learning experiences or mistakes that you've made when you've been working on a specific transaction and deal?
I would say, I don't know that I think the mistakes I made was early on, like 13 years ago, was probably not a stronger emphasis on the seller's accounting. So instead of trying to put together the accounting when you're on market, you should have all that stuff finished ahead of time. And some folks, they do cash basis accounting, which is, whenever they get to get paid by clients, that's when they record the revenue versus, maybe it's an accounts receivable. So just understanding the cash and accrual 13 years ago and its impact was critical until today. What we do with all of our clients is we get their books in order way ahead of time. And so when we go to market, everything's pristine, and we're not we're not delayed with a buyer in terms of cleaning up the books as they request things. So we get all the books cleaned up way ahead of
So
time.
when
So
you
I probably
say
see that was big.
when you say cleaning up the books, does that mean just working with their internal accounting staff or bringing out an outside accountant to kind of pull things together and put in processes so that it is tightened up?
Yeah. So one of the things that's really important is we convince or try to convince business owners that to invest a lot in accounting. So sometimes if the business is large enough, we can bring an outside professional, typically a CFO, to come in and help manage a project of getting the books up to generally accepted accounting principles, so GAAP. And you don't necessarily always need an audit. That's like a mistaken belief a lot of folks have. They have to get their books audited. You don't always need it. It just depends on the size of your business. But you do need to get the books on almost always on an accrual basis, GAAP basis, or at least close to GAAP, and have somebody be a liaison that understands your books, how you're recording revenue. And when you go to market, you're able to have that professional, that individual answer questions from the buyer's accounting professional. That'll make this deal go by so much smoother if you have that. And today we won't even go to market with a client if they don't want to invest on just having really clean books and records.
So what is kind of an interesting deal that you're working on today that may be a year or two down the road? Just kind of a one paragraph overview.
So I have one. These folks are packing, and they own a packing and shipping company, and they've had this business, I want to say, since 1987, and they're doing.
What do they pack and ship?
So they compete really against. They partner with UPS and FedEx, but actually compete against the UPS and FedEx stores. And they have a little more than a half a dozen stores here in Southern California, and you'd think that retail's dead, but they are just crushing it. They're doing so well. And they also have 20% of their business is wholesale. And that is a major, major growth opportunity is wholesale, because you can scale without actually adding locations by getting wholesale relationships. And you can sell packing material to large businesses. And there's just a tremendous amount, like entertainment companies out here in Southern California, they use a lot of packing material. So this is a new project I'm working on now. We're going to be going to market pretty soon. And, my hope and expectation is this is going to be a nice 8-figure transaction, which is a good one for us. It's right in our sweet spot. And I'm really excited about it.
So as a seasoned advisor, what changes and trends do you see on the horizon that's going to impact, the M&A industry or the economy as a whole?
I would say the one thing that's just in the back of my mind is inflation and interest rates. I'm really curious right now because our clients have seen such rich valuations, and it's because money is so cheap right now. Interest rates are so low. Every buyer, from the largest private equity firm to C-level executives, are all affected by interest rates when they do a deal. So if interest rates go up, prices go down. So right now it's so great and there's so much money. And I think about that. I think about, what happens when, if inflation makes a comeback and interest rates are going up, buyers can't pay the same multiples anymore because money costs more. That's one thing I wonder, but I have to tell you, it's like, there's more money than there are businesses to buy. There's just so much money out there right now. And it's a remarkable time to sell almost anything. But in my world, businesses are just highly valued today. If it's a profitable, healthy business, you get tremendous multiples that people didn't think were possible 10 years ago that private market owners are getting.
Well, now that you have some, experience under your belt and more than a decade of doing this, if you look back, what would you tell your 30-year-old self with the wisdom that you have today? What advice would you give?
Marvin, you asked some good questions. So I would say, candidly, I probably I'd buy a business. I'm a big advocate for buying businesses versus building them. I'm somebody that have built one from scratch. I built 2 from scratch, this one and my prior one. And I have to say, people are so much better off finding a good business and buying it at a fair price and growing it, especially if it's in an industry that you can scale. I candidly probably would have bought a business. I would. I'm in the business of helping people broker deals and buying and selling businesses, but I'm a huge advocate for buying businesses. If you can apply your skill and time and work hard, it's a lot easier to buy something that's proven, that's already generating revenue and growing it, and something that you can generate equity so you can sell. And my business itself is really hard. It's me primarily. I'm involved in every transaction. It's like my business, ironically enough, isn't that sellable. Whereas if I had a manufacturing business, distribution, or other types of business services, and I had recurring revenue or a consumable product, it's like I could retire and sell I could buy my building that my business is in, which I encourage a lot of owners to have done if they didn't do it already. So that's what I'd probably do is buy a company.
Well, one final question as we wrap up here today, Bob. What would you have done differently during COVID? Is there anything that you would have done differently?
Boy,
now that we have some benefit of hindsight behind us and know kind of what the outcome is going to be, rewind a year ago, and what would you have done or tell others to do differently?
Boy, I probably would have bought some stock. I mean, the stock market is phenomenal. With respect to my,
there you go.
Yeah, with respect to my, that would probably be the only thing. Quite frankly, we just, my family, we just made the best of it. I have a 4-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl, and I just used that time to spend with them, and it was just wonderful. I spent so much time with especially my daughter, who is so little.
Well, I've had a number of people say that's the big takeaway from COVID is that the different perception on lifestyle being more important than other considerations that they had pre-COVID, because they had this window of time to hit pause and spend time with family, or evolve personally on various aspects of their life, and where they wouldn't have had it otherwise if COVID hadn't happened. But anyway, I'm sure we all learned different things from.
Well, what about you, Marvin? Tell me what you got out of COVID. What would you do differently through the pandemic?
Well, I think it goes along with what I just said, is that since I talk to advisors like yourself and business owners and professional deal makers, the whole pause, what is really important in life, that people are making different decisions today than they would have made 2 years ago on how they're looking at their business and how they're positioning it for sale and how quickly they want to move toward that decision process. And for me personally, it was a time just to stand back and evaluate and look at those relationships that are meaningful to you and invest in them, because I went through parts of times in my career that are lost forever because I had different priorities at the time. And COVID has, I think, allowed a lot of people to reset and focus on what is really meaningful in their lives personally. So that's what I would take away from COVID. As well as we had a crystal ball and could go back, dump a bunch of money in the stock market, March 15th of last year.
Yeah, exactly. That was like
mortgage your house and put it in the stock market.
That's right. I don't have any regrets of my time, how I spent it. Aside from that, I just I loved my time with my kids. It was weirdly enough, it was like in many ways like some of the best moments of my life were during the pandemic. So weird to say that, and I know a lot of people lost their lives.
Counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah,
counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Well, this has been delightful, Bob. I appreciate you taking the time, sharing your thoughts, insights, and wisdom with us here today. If people want to reach out to you and get a hold of you and chat a little bit more about your business and perhaps their business, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So the name of my firm is Sea Point Business Advisors. We're in Westlake Village, California. You can find me on the web at seapointadvisors.com. And you can also call me simply at 805-557-8200 and email me Bob at sea, like the ocean, SEA, pointadvisors.com.
All right, Bob, thanks for sharing the time with us here today. And you'll see you on our next episode here at Business Exit Stories, and where we'll learn a little bit more about the advisors that share their experiences and insights about how to get your business marketed and sold, and providing a profitable and successful exit for yourself.
Thank you for having me, Marvin.